Most people picture AI job loss as a layoff. Someone leaves, software arrives, and headcount falls. But the clearest early warning in the labor data is showing up somewhere much quieter: hiring. Through June 2026, Stanford found a 19% relative gap for workers ages 22 to 25 in more AI-exposed occupations. Experienced workers did not show the same gap, and the difference appeared mainly through fewer hires. If you're already 5 or 10 years into a white-collar career, that doesn't say you're next. It suggests the more immediate change may be happening underneath you. A team can keep every employee it has and still decide it doesn't need the next junior analyst, recruiter, marketer, or developer. Nothing gets announced when that happens. There is no layoff memo because nobody was there to lay off. The org chart barely changes, but the doorway into it gets narrower. That is what makes this labor market shift so easy to miss. A career ladder can look normal from the top, while the first rung gets harder to reach. The first question is whether that pattern is actually showing up in the data. The strongest early evidence comes from payroll records analyzed by Stanford's Digital Economy Lab. The researchers compare young workers in occupations classified as more exposed to AI with similar workers in less exposed occupations. Through June 2026, the exposed group was 19% behind the path of its less exposed peers. That is a relative gap, not a claim that employment simply fell 19%. The difference also looks unusually concentrated by age. Workers with more experience did not show the same employment pattern, and when Stanford separated people leaving jobs from people starting them, hiring was where the young worker gap appeared. That gives this story a very different shape from the familiar replacement narrative. A company does not have to remove a junior employee for junior employment to weaken. It can simply add fewer of them. Census administrative data points in the same direction from a different data set. Through the second quarter of 2025, employment among 22 to 24-year-olds in the most exposed industry state group declined 12% over 10 quarters. Less exposed industries were much more stable in that comparison. Again, the main adjustment came through fewer hires. So there is a real entry-level anomaly worth explaining, but 2 datasets are enough to establish the puzzle. The more important question is why a manager might make this decision before anyone gets fired. Imagine a team of 3 experienced analysts that normally brings in a junior every year. That junior handles first drafts, basic research, data cleanup, formatting, and the routine work seniors eventually review. Now suppose software makes part of that first pass work much faster. The team suddenly has spare capacity. Management now has several choices. It can keep the same team and leave the next vacancy unfilled. It can keep the same team and ask for more output. Or it can use the extra capacity to grow and hire even more people. The technology can be identical in all 3 cases. The hiring outcome depends on what management does with the capacity it creates. That is why productivity does not translate mechanically into fewer jobs. Productivity creates options, and managers turn those options into headcount. For a junior applicant, the first option is almost invisible. 3 existing analysts plus software absorb the workload, so the 4th job is never opened. No worker was replaced because there was never a worker in that seat. The missing hire is the labor outcome. This also helps explain a second pressure showing up in job postings. PwC's analysis of postings from 2019 through 2025 found a striking change in highly AI-exposed junior roles. Those postings were about 7 times more likely to ask for emerging skills traditionally associated with more experienced workers. Skills like judgment, leadership, and higher-level decision-making are appearing earlier in the advertised career ladder. A posting is not a hire, so that finding cannot prove that companies employed fewer beginners. But it does show something important about the price of admission. If routine first-pass work becomes cheaper, employers can ask a beginner to contribute something harder from day one. The squeeze can happen twice. Fewer seats, then a higher bar for the seats that remain. That matters because junior work has never been only cheap production. It is also where people learn how the harder work is actually done. A first-year analyst learns judgment partly by producing work that a third-year analyst corrects. A junior marketer learns what matters by seeing which draft the client rejects and which one survives. A new developer learns the system by fixing small problems before anyone trusts them with large ones. Remove too much of that work and the company still needs judgment, but the route to acquiring it changes. This is where the simple story that AI automatically destroys junior hiring starts to break. BNY is one useful example because it has been pushing AI into everyday knowledge work while still investing in early career talent. Chief Executive Robin Vince said the bank had increased analyst and intern hiring over the previous 2 years. His explanation was not that AI had become irrelevant. He argued that younger workers arriving with AI skills could help the bank move faster and do more. That is one company's account, not proof of what the whole financial sector is doing. Its value is showing a different management response to the same basic technology. AI can create capacity, and a company can decide to spend that capacity on growth. The broader firm data makes that contradiction harder to ignore. In a Census business survey fielded from November 2025 into February 2026, augmentation was far more common than simple worker substitution. Among firms reporting effects on worker tasks, 66% said AI was used only to augment those tasks. Only about 2% of surveyed firms reported employment decreases associated with AI. A separate study from Ramp and Revelio Labs found something even less compatible with a universal junior job collapse story. Among high-intensity adopters in their sample, entry-level headcount rose 12% over the 2 years following adoption. Those adopters were already larger, more technical, and faster growing than companies that did not adopt as intensely. So the result does not prove that AI creates entry-level jobs. It does prove why adoption by itself is a weak shortcut for predicting what happens to employment. The same tool can arrive at 2 firms and produce opposite hiring decisions. That is not a problem for this story. It is the mechanism. Software changes what a team can produce with a given amount of labor. Management decides whether that extra capacity becomes lower cost, higher output, higher profit, or more hiring. The software creates options. Managers decide which option becomes somebody's job. There is another reason to resist a simple AI-caused-it explanation. The entire U.S. hiring market has been weak. In June 2026, LinkedIn's national hiring measure was 7.5% below a year earlier. Its analysis points mainly to broader economic uncertainty and monetary conditions for that slowdown. Census researchers also estimate that monetary policy shocks could explain up to 1/4 of the relative early career employment decline they observed through the second quarter of 2025. Those forces matter because a decline in hiring is not automatically evidence of AI. Young workers can be hit especially hard when companies become cautious for ordinary economic reasons. Post-pandemic corrections, education patterns, remote work, and sector composition complicate the picture further. And Stanford itself is careful about what its 19% result can support. The researchers describe the finding as descriptive rather than a clean causal estimate of AI's effect. Some divergence began before generative AI, and controlling for education makes the measured gap smaller. So the strongest honest conclusion is narrower than the headline version of this story. Young workers in more AI-exposed work are falling behind comparable peers, and the difference is showing up unusually strongly through hiring. That pattern survives enough comparisons to deserve attention. But the current evidence cannot tell us how much of the gap AI caused, and that uncertainty leads to a more useful question than whether AI is simply taking beginner jobs. Why do some companies appear to need fewer beginners while other heavy adopters keep hiring them? The capacity model gives us a way to understand both outcomes without pretending they are the same. Take that team of 3 experienced analysts again. If demand for its work is flat, faster first drafts can reduce the reason to add another person. A manager under pressure to control costs has an obvious place to capture the gain. The next vacancy stays empty. But if the firm has more customers than it can serve, the exact same productivity gain can support expansion. More output can justify more analysts, more salespeople, more support staff, and more junior hires. One company uses AI to avoid adding payroll. Another uses it to make a larger payroll productive. That choice sits between technological capability and the labor outcome we eventually see. This is why exposure is not the same thing as adoption. Adoption is not the same thing as automation. And automation of some tasks is not the same thing as elimination of a job. A job is a bundle of tasks, and management decides how the remaining bundle gets staffed. That distinction also explains why the current evidence looks different for experienced workers. Experienced employees tend to own more judgment, context, review, client interaction, and exception handling. Those are the parts of a workflow that can become more important when routine production gets cheaper. For someone 5 or 10 years into a career, that creates a very different risk from simple replacement. The current data does not show the same employment gap for you that it shows for the youngest workers. Instead, your team may change around you. The junior analyst who normally arrived next quarter may never be approved. The new hire who does arrive may be expected to show judgment that previous cohorts learned after joining. More first drafts may arrive already generated, leaving experienced workers to review exceptions and make higher stakes decisions. Your role can become more senior in practice without your title moving at all. You may spend less time producing routine work and more time deciding whether that work is right. That can increase the value of experience. It can also increase the amount of mentoring and judgment expected from the people who already have it. Experience can become more valuable at the same moment experience becomes harder to acquire. That is the career ladder tension hiding inside the hiring data. And it creates a second-order question the labor market cannot answer yet. Companies need experienced people, because someone previously gave those people beginner work, feedback, and time to improve. If firms remove some of that work, they have to replace the learning function somehow. They can redesign junior roles around AI. They can invest more deliberately in training and mentoring. They can hire experienced workers from other companies. Or they can assume someone else will keep producing the talent they need. BNY's Continued Analyst program shows one possible answer. Keep the pipeline, but change what beginners learn. Other firms may choose differently. There is not enough evidence yet to say the economy is producing a future shortage of senior workers. People change occupations, firms retrain employees, new tasks appear, and apprenticeship itself can evolve. Any pipeline problem would also take years to become visible. That delay is exactly why the hiring mechanism matters now. A layoff tells you immediately that a job disappeared. A missing junior hire can stay invisible until an entire career ladder starts looking thinner. The current evidence does not show AI wiping out white-collar careers from the top down. It shows a narrower warning at the entrance, mixed with a weak economy and very different management choices. The next test is whether that hiring gap survives when the broader labor market gets stronger. Then we can see whether actual adopters consistently shrink junior pipelines or simply redesign them. The first rung can disappear quietly, long before anyone notices who was supposed to climb it.